show that we did a while ago. Not going to lie, through the magic of editing, it's come together at a different point, but we recorded it with 3 listeners, Daisy, Ellie and Stacey. Well, it was Miles's idea, and it was a really good idea to kind of, because we recognise that the XFM world is kind of male dominated. We can see on our stats, we're male dominated in our own audience, yet Miles and I, neither of us are kind of blokey, laddie guys like cars. I like football, but we don't talk about it is down Millwall every week. But no, but we're not laddie, but it's a male dominated world. But we knew that we had some female listeners, so we just wanted to kind of approach it and see how female listeners saw it. Did they see themselves as being in a male dominated space, or did they perceive it differently? And we just had a talk about that. There's very little structure to it. You'll hear that, the hosts, were the problem, if there was any. They were great.
No, that is all true. And it's nice to experiment with a new form and do something that's a bit more opening it out into Asia. And I think it's good to invite listeners on. It was such a nice little sort of listening, podcasting experiment. We've never had listeners onto the show before, and it's so nice to put a face to a name and discuss these shows openly, because what is so brilliant about one of our best features, XFM in the community, is hearing your voices. So it's so nice to invite people onto the podcast to share their opinions and thoughts widely and openly on a podcast. Miles
deserves a lot of credit, because he kind of is his idea. I would never have he thought the innovation is with Miles, because I'm kind of the same part of it, but you often have ideas. Oh, good, we'll interview this person and this person. I probably would never have done an interview if it was I was in charge. But I love them. I'm glad we did. But
you're good at them. Yeah.
Well, yeah, do like them. But this one wasn't an interview. It's different, wasn't it? It wasn't like
it's discussion.
It didn't feel like an interview, but
I thought it was going to be. I thought it was a bit like the media show. That's what I wanted, with Katie Razzle and Ross Atkins.
Who was Razzle? Me or you?
I don't think either of us, to be honest.
It was like Letters from America by.
No,
it was like, do you know, on Fridays with Chris Evans.
TFI.
They just used to be everywhere. Like they used to be here, a bit there, around the table, like that.
It's like that.
But less lucrative for us. Yeah, check it out. Let us know your thoughts, and we will be doing these in future with a wide array of listeners. This one was specifically to explore the female angle in this male-dominated space, which we thought was an interesting kind of thing to get into, and I think it was interesting. I think the girls were great, and we weren't. Do what you like.
Oh, there we go. It started.
I haven't prepared
your vocal exercises.
Okay.
Come on.
So anyway, put a P in, and the word was spoon. Now, a very, very special show. Miles, welcome to it, of the Trout Spinners. Say hello, Miles.
Hello, how are you?
Miles is here with me.
Yeah.
But we've got guests, multiple guests today. And that's because Miles and I have we've looked at the stats, and we've always wondered why it seems to be a male-dominated space, a sort of 90-10 split. And we're thinking, well, there's nothing obvious that we can see, because it's obviously presented by 3 men. But they're not like laddie lads. They don't talk about cars. If they talk about women, it's like as a joke. So what is it about the XFM shows? Because their numbers are about what our numbers are, and it's about 90-10. Why are there fewer women involved? So we have got 3 of the women. That sounds so terrible. Sorry, I don't mean that. 3 ladies who listen to the
start,
show,
isn't it?
who are good listeners, and they contributors. Yeah, exactly. Slagging us off already, Miles. Should we just leave? You can talk.
We have
good
stuff.
Daisy, we have Ellie May, and we have Stacey Brittle. Hello, ladies. And I didn't mean that wasn't like a joke, Steve. Stand up. Do you want to just introduce yourself one by one, Daisy? Say hello and sort of your name.
Hello, I'm Daisy.
Hello, Daisy.
Hello.
Daisy.
Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ellie. Hello.
Hello, Ellie. Stacey.
Hello.
Hello, Stacey.
Okay.
And we're about done for today. No, Miles, talk a little bit more about kind of what we're going to do today and what we're going to talk about.
And there we have our lovely panel that will help us today to shape a loose discussion about listener demographics and gender in comedy, I think, more broadly. But just to give you some context of the sort of show demographics, we looked at the Radar original figures, and apparently the reach of X. Oh, well, I did.
I didn't do any work for this.
I did a bit of that.
Yeah.
This is exciting. This is like the media show. This is all like question time. No, is that it? Yeah. So the reach of the show of XFM in the third quarter of Series 2, which started in August, was about 535,000 people. Can you believe that? That's not that many people. But we looked at obviously our own figures, and 89% of the audience is men and 11 is women, and it's just shocking. That's such a huge disparity, like between the two. Then there's no, as you said, there's no distinct reason, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. And then I looked at the Tin Pot Radio, who had uploaded all of the XFM shows, and their demographics kind of reflected the same, and it was 86% men and 14% female, which is just, I don't know. I just find that a bit striking, really. It's nothing, it's very odd. So obviously we've got a panel here, and I sent a few questions over, but I just wondered, Ellie, maybe you could start us off, because you sent us a really well-written email that we spoke about last week or a couple of weeks ago. And I thought that would be a great way just to start to sort of, you eloquently expressed it very, very well. I'm sure much better than I possibly could.
That's true.
Well, I think to go back to what Gary was saying, obviously, I wouldn't say it's lads' humour either. I think it is a bit boyish. I think there's boyish childhood humour in it, and I think that's quite endearing. As to why, I don't know, it's very strange. Why aren't women listening? Because I would certainly class it as a unisex show. They're not overly, like you said, not overly talking about men's issues or men's affairs, and it is really unisex. Now, I was going to say, of course, you do have a woman on the show a couple of times. You have Claire.
I never listened to the Claire episodes. I always skip them. Apart from when you guys reviewed them, I listened to Head, but I always skip them. There's nothing against Claire, but yeah, I always skip those ones.
Interesting. I think Claire's good, but it's a very different show. If it had always been Claire, it wouldn't be a cult hit like it is now. But occasionally Claire, I think, is kind of, and we talk about, which may be relevant to this, the lads on the Claire show, Ricky and Steve, they seem different. They're kind of like, when women are involved, it's like, oh, they're sort of, I don't know, trying to impress and not.
Yeah, they're showing off a bit. Yeah. I think Ricky especially, I think he's a lot more comfortable around women. Obviously, he's got like a long-term girlfriend. He's with Jane, and I feel like he's more relaxed. Whereas I feel like Steve is still like, as if he's at school and trying to show off and sort of one up and be the funniest one or say the most wild thing.
No, so I never picked up on that with those Claire shows. I don't know if I think they're a bit different, only a little bit. I think it's subtle, but I think it's because Carl's not there.
So it could be anyone. It could be a male in for Carl, just because it's not Carl, you think? It's just that's why it's different.
Who was the guy that they did a show and he was in...
Ian Canfield.
Yeah, that one I tend to skip. But
I do.
Yeah, totally. I think it's something to do with socialization of women as to why they maybe don't listen to this kind of show so much. But I also think it's other things. I think it might be something to do with social classes as well. Yeah, because I think it's quite, I don't know if this is accurate, I don't know if this is even a thing, but it's something I thought about. It's like almost like a working class person's humor. Like those who are working class will appreciate Ricky's humor in particular, I think, more than other people. Maybe, I don't know. It's something I've thought about before. And I don't know if that has a link then to the female thing, I don't know.
I do think it is very like gendered in respect that if you think of the time, like late 90s, early 90s, it's like when all those lads mags were in sort of circulation, you obviously Nuts and Zoo and Loaded and all that crap. But the humour in there was always like about, I don't know, little like dwarfs and disfigurements and horrid, ghastly things like that, and obviously leering over women and stuff. And I don't think that the guys on the show are 100% like that, but there definitely is that sort of juvenile, that Carl's fascination with like weirdness and freaks that was kind of typical of that era or class of men, I suppose.
Is it a laddish thing? Is it a boyish male thing, that sort of humour?
I quite like laddish humour, and I'd assume that
Yeah.
maybe Daisy and Ellie are the same. I'd be interested to know if
I've got
the
4
female listeners-
brothers, so I think growing up with 4 brothers has made that a bit easier to like that sort of thing.
It's hard, isn't it? Because at that time you would have had quite the ladette movement.
That's very true as well.
Going out, drinking, partying, sort of like the gimme sort of state.
Oh, I love that show.
I mean, my female friends, I think back to when the shows were around, and I think they wouldn't have been interested in that kind of humour. So I think, it's just something to do with the kind of person that you are as well, with the humour that you're into. I mean, now I've got friends, they wouldn't be interested in it. I've got one friend who has listened, but she's not like me. She won't listen over and over again. She gives it a run through every now and again, but I can't quote it to her. I can't, which is annoying. I can't, because she doesn't listen to it that often. She's the only female friend. Well, then I say that, I haven't really got any male friends that I think would be into it, me personally. But it obviously is male dominated in terms of the listeners.
Well, you said something earlier. You said the socialization of women, which is an interesting point. I just wondered if you could expand a bit on that.
It's kind of like the whole job thing, isn't it? How there's a gender gap in certain jobs and things, and I think that's to do with the socialization of women. Obviously, the whole thing about men earning more money and things, and that's because women have been socialized to not be in certain jobs, and that's obviously they're changing that now. There's a lot more push into STEM jobs for women and stuff, and I think that might be part of it as well. I think women have been or were or are socialized in a certain way, and it still goes on. It's getting better, and I think women are socialized to be in certain jobs and to appreciate or not like certain types of things, i.e. that boyish humor. It's just something they were never maybe exposed to as much. Like, I think if parents had a son, they might expose that son to certain types of humour and things they wouldn't expose their daughter to. Not deliberately, it's just that they say it's one of those entrenched socialisation things that's getting better. I mean, my dad was like, I'm quite into games and computers and things, but it's because my dad was quite good with that in terms of he would share that with me. But then things like fixing things and building things, he was very good at that, but he never kind of shared that with me. And I don't know if that was from that generation, a socialization thing, but funnily enough, he did share all the computer and humor stuff with me, and I think that's where I've picked it up.
What do you guys think about that, Daisy, Ellie?
I think, I definitely agree. I think there's so much that is gendered without you even realizing it. Like, so much of our day-to-day life is completely different as a woman than it would be a man, and the things you get exposed to, and you don't even think how you're doing it. And it's stupid, but I've got a dog and he's quite fluffy and he's very cute. So when we're out, people always say she. They're like, oh look, she's so beautiful. And it's just because he's soft and he's fluffy that he gets gendered in a female way, which is really interesting, the little things that you gender down.
See, recently my friend, she put a request out for podcasts to be recommended by others. And I do wonder if less women listen to podcasts and that sort of thing anyway.
Yeah.
Even getting into the comedy side, because he had about 10 responses, and out of those 10, 8 were psychology podcasts. Now, she doesn't work in psychology and she has no interest in psychology, yet 8 out of 10 of them were psychology podcasts. I think there was one that was film and TV related, but a complete lack of comedy. So I do wonder if that is also the issue, is that women generally don't listen to podcasts, and if they do, they don't listen to comedy.
I think the problem is, because I do think there is a bit of sexism which suggests that women only like female comedy. I don't know, that's quite a broad analysis of it, but that's why, when you get like panel shows and stuff and they bring women on, sometimes it is a bit like they're trying to fill a gap.
Like a token female comedian.
Yeah, it's so sexist, and it's just like, we've got to bring the other audience on board. But I do think, in terms of like radio entertainment, because I do listen to a lot of podcasts myself, I do think it's always like 2 guys, which we're not the best example for that, obviously, or it's like 3 guys and they do a podcast. And like, I'm a big fan of like Fortunately with like Fee and Jane, and I wish there was more podcasts like that.
I was thinking about that time slot, and the only people I could think that have had like that XFM time slot were obviously Ricky and Steve and Carl, and then you have Adam and Joe, and then more recently you had Ellis and John, and then they were replaced by like Matthew Crosby and Ed Gamble. So again, it always seems to be like the male duo, like you say.
Why?
And there's never like 2 women or even a woman and a man that just gel together.
Yeah.
The two men is the sort of trope for that.
But again, is that something to do with socialization? Is that because women weren't coming forward for it, because they didn't think that was their thing, because of the socialization of society? I don't know. Or was there a lot of women who came forward and they kind of said, no, we don't really want you?
No, I think you're right actually on that, because like I got into chess about 5 years ago. I'd never played before.
Here we go.
I got obsessed by chess, but chess is very male dominated in the same kind of way. And the top 100 players in the world, 99 are men. Now some people misinterpret that and say, oh, men are inherently better at chess than women, but it's not like that at all. It's socialization, as you say, which is why I asked about your point, because women have been socialized. The men, as a boy, boys tend to get taught chess, women didn't. So they've got such a structural disadvantage. And that's why there's so few women in chess, although that is changing, but
there is an
argument.
There is an argument for it. We just don't know, do we? Like you say, it could be the socialization, and women wouldn't have been taught chess. Although I actually was taught to play chess when I was young, but I hate it, so I've never played it again.
Why didn't you do a podcast about it then?
Yeah, we'll do it together. We'll do one.
But there is also evidence, science to prove that men's brains are wired differently. They do think about things in different ways. They do say things that require that kind of thought process, that their brains are wired differently to that. So I think it's maybe I don't know how much of it is, but maybe there's a bit of that, but then it's been emphasized by the socialization in society, maybe.
Yeah, the socialization never gets aired, though. It's always that bit that the brains are different, and kind of people latch onto that when it's not necessarily the case, although maybe there is a small difference, but there's no reason why women can't get as good as men at chess.
It's harder to measure, isn't it? You can measure the brain wiring, you can do a brain scan, you can look at that. Socialization, there's not as much empirical evidence for it.
People want stats and figures, don't they?
You can't really measure it. It's harder just to measure. You can ask people how, about their growing up and their exposure to things, but you'll never know if they're being truthful or if they're exaggerating things, or you can't physically measure it. Whereas a brain scan, you can measure it and say, yep, that brain is different to that brain. That's it, fact.
You can't, like you say, you can't measure it, but also I think a lot of women don't even realize a lot of it as well. I didn't notice until I was a lot older a lot of things that were different for me because I'm a woman, or things that are gendered towards me, or the terminology even that's used. And it wasn't until I started actively thinking about that I noticed so much more. So a lot of it, I think, just goes under the wire. And it's hard when you start pointing that out to try and notice and try and change that. It's so much easier, especially for this, like for society, for everybody. It's easier to just think, oh, we'll just carry on as we are, rather than actually trying to notice these things, because a lot of change will need to happen. So it's easy just to, carry on.
I always get a bit nervous when I hear things like, oh, we need more women in this sector or this, because obviously it is about class, it is about sex, but it's also about the opportunity. And I think really we should be having that conversation more about schools. Can schools teach the kids to get into these sectors rather than, oh, we need more women?
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't got enough examples of race within the industry.
I think it can become very dangerous when you think it's a token woman or a token sort of minority. Anything tokenistic is where it gets dangerous. You can't just have a woman just because we need a woman to fill the quota.
For self-respect reasons, I imagine, more than anything. If you knew that, it would impact you and the others around.
I think the problem is when you're trying to make a movement like that and have more women or more people of colour or whatever it is in a certain industry, because there's not enough of it, obviously, and that needs to change because there's issues with. I think initially when that movement starts to happen, it does feel like tokenism, even if it's not, because you're just not used to seeing it. So initially, people assume it's tokenistic, even if it's not, because but that by definition, when a movement happens and things change, when it first starts to happen, people aren't used to it, so it gets perceived as tokenistic. But then that over time will change, I think.
And you guess you could switch it the other way and say, well, every time it wasn't a woman or wasn't someone of minority race, that was a tokenistic. They were just all tokens, but because they were white and men. So you're right. If you change it slightly to say we are going to include X amount of people that aren't from those groups, inherently you are going to get people just as talented overall, but it feels quite uncomfortable maybe whilst it's starting.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And initially people aren't used to it, and certain people will, argue against it, obviously, which we don't want.
I do think, like, obviously, but this sort of change has obviously got to come from the top, right? This is all, it's structural, it's hierarchical, there's so much bureaucracy involved. Like, you look at all of, like, the big heads of whoever it is, like a big broadcasting organization or whoever it is, and they're nearly always men at the top of these things. So, but yeah, I don't think it's fair just to hire someone on the grounds of their gender or their color or whatever. I think that's just because you'll carry that with you, won't you? And men have never had to carry that kind of, particularly white men, have never had to carry that kind of pressure. I work in tech, and like half of our sort of gender is like 15, but it hasn't always been like that. It's always been like 80% male, and it's so weird. Like, as someone who grew up with a sister and a mum, like, I naturally feel like I get on better with women anyway.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people aren't like me, actually, and most men are kind of are happy or at peace with company with other men, whereas I think it's better to create a dialogue across the spectrum so that you can appreciate people's views and attitudes. But I do think it's interesting with Claire and with Carl, the two differences, because Claire holds the power in those shows, and she's like, everyone wants to impress her, so I would call that as, she owns that show, whereas Carl is always, superficially, he should be running the show, but they don't respect him, or they do, but they do respect him behind closed doors. So it's actually a feeling of power that comes with gender as well, I think.
I think you're right, and Claire does sort of hold the power there, but I think if you also look at it, whereas Carl is able to take risks and do things that are rubbish, whereas Claire is very much by the book, and she comes in, she presses the buttons, she does everything she needs to do perfectly, where she doesn't have the same flexibility as Carl to come in and try something that might be rubbish. It might be like the rice is right or something, and he can come in and do something that's terrible, and it's okay. There's not a real risk. Whereas with Claire, it feels like there's more of a risk where she has to do it perfectly, or she has to do it right. She can't come in, and I might be wrong and just sort of projecting onto her, but it feels as though she has to come in and just do the job rather than have that freedom to play or be silly or do something wrong. Or
she does get things where she puts the wrong CD on and things, and which Carl does numerous times, but Ricky gets quite annoyed with her, and Steve does as well. They are real, and when she's telling her biggest knob I've ever seen anecdote, she doesn't quite tell it, she gets coy, and then Ricky does have quite a go at her afterwards and said, you never said that bit, you just said, left out the funny bit out. But I think Claire's got power, but not as much as maybe you think. Like, she's maybe got power over Steve. I don't think Ricky, maybe because Steve's single, I don't think Claire has.
But I think that's because the way that men view women, and nearly always, and this obviously can be appreciated. There's going to be a lot of generalizations this chat, not just within our group, but to anyone listening. And I apologize if that's what it sounds like. But I do think men kind of look for that kind of. I think you said that, Ellie or Stacey, that sort of maternal figure. You're very comforted by that as a guy. Even in my own relationship, and my girlfriend's just literally over there. I'll be very quiet. Hello.
Well, this isn't a date. Don't worry. We're not on a blind double date, triple date.
Anyway, yeah, I do think men are kind of attracted to that in a weird way. So that's why I think Ricky and Steve sort of play up to it more.
Well, very famously, you had like Goldie Hawn, didn't you? Who always portrayed a ditzy persona in order to get that endearment. When in fact, she's a very smart woman. And Claire is a bit the same in those episodes, like when they try to phone up Carl and she can't get him on there.
Yeah.
Or a ditzy, don't know what I'm doing. Whereas obviously she could produce a show, so she might own what she was doing.
Yeah. Incredibly talented, obviously. Then Ricky says, well, how do you normally phone? She just says, well, I just press the numbers. And that makes Ricky look stupid. I quite like that. She owns him.
But why is that? Why do people? Is it for your benefit or not you, but like, is it for the other person's benefit, or is it? I don't know, or is it just playing on a stereotype for ease?
I've been on dates before where the easiest thing is to be like, oh, I'm just a silly little woman, and to play it down and play the dumb person. And I would never do it now, but when I was younger and less confident, I think it is, you just fall into that trope, and it feels like the safest thing, because the man can't get angry, or he can't challenge me, or he can't try to flex basically his masculinity over me. So it is just easier to be the sort of dumb young woman. And again, I would never do that now, and it's an awful thing to have to do, but it is easier in many situations.
I agree, and I think it does happen a lot, but I also think there are some women who they're okay with, they like that, they find comfort in that.
Yeah.
But then you say there is some women who feel pressure to do that.
I don't know. I wonder whether or not Steve actually does something similar himself, because he is also very sort of self-mocking. He
doesn't really have a choice, does he?
That's true. That's very true.
But it's a good point.
That sort of humour instantly gets people on your side. You know, you're showing that you're not big-headed, you are humble.
Yeah, it's really disarming, isn't it?
I think that self-deprecating humour, that was like very of like the early noughties. Like I remember, like, you know, one of my idols was like Simon Amstel, who like thrived off that kind of humour, and definitely something that I carried. You know, whatever gender you are, I think it's just a sense of humour thing rather than a gender thing. Again, as you said, Ellie, it's like you empower yourself if you go, well, I'm wearing this and you're not. And Steve mercilessly gets taken the piss out of, like, but he's seen as the weaker. If you're looking at the weak man,
the chaff.
Yeah, he's a victim, isn't he? Of all three of them, I think he's often comes off worse than Carl.
Have you seen the stand-up Hello Ladies?
A bit of it.
Yeah, I went to see it live. It was really good.
Oh, did you?
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
And it's completely, the whole thing self-deprecating.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
and the very end when he does the thing with the camera in his eyes.
Yes.
I've never seen his eyes like that.
I know. It's
Terrifying.
unflattering. He literally got the camera and put it to his face. The most unflattering angle.
Oh my god.
Because he can look quite handsome sometimes, and then other times he looks normal, and there he looks really scary.
Yeah.
Quite normal.
But yeah, I've seen a bit of it. I like the bit where he goes at the beginning. He says, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I don't need to share it with you know who. And I kind of feel from there, it's like, it's the one thing that Ricky doesn't get half his money, or like 90% of the money between them. It's his own little thing. But he's gone on to have a fantastic career. I mean, he's independently from anyone else. So, but yeah.
Is that another thing that's like women are less self-deprecating? I don't know.
I do think when I was at school,
in their humour, I mean,
it was definitely like the cool thing was to be seen as like less intelligent. Unfortunately, you kind of have to hide your intelligence because you play off either your looks or your beauty or whatever it is. It's
thanks.
Shame. It's shameless and it's sexist and it's awful.
It is, yeah.
But it's pressure, isn't it?
There's an undue burden, I think, on women in general. But
because you have to prove yourself. It's not, you would, in the same way you would not put those expectations on a man, would you? You wouldn't say, oh, you need to be this, you need to have this many degrees or whatever. You just walk into the job and you go, yeah, I'm funny, I'm laddie. Like it's like my dad. Like he's a bit of a, lad about town, and everyone just accepts it. He's a total prick, but they just accept it because he's quite funny.
It's like you say, like when Carl makes the mistakes on the show and they laugh about it, whereas Claire makes the mistakes and they do laugh, but they're also like, yeah, a bit annoying.
They don't. It's not as much of a joke when Claire makes mistakes, but when Carl makes mistakes, they have a right go at him. But it's a joke in a more jokey.
Yeah, it becomes funny.
Yeah, it's like funny that's not directed at Carl as such, as more shared humour. But Claire, they're quite harsh to.
Yeah, I do wonder. I don't listen to the Claire episodes very often, but I do think they are good episodes. But I always get the impression with them that Steve might have gone to Ricky before each show and said, look, Carl's not here this week. Let's be professional. Let's not talk about monkeys. Let's actually do a professional radio.
I agree with you 100%, Ellie, actually. I think we said this last episode. I was like, I think Steve genuinely wanted it to be a different kind of show than the one it actually was. I feel like he had bigger aspirations of like, we're going to do a slick show. We're going to play some amazing music. We're going to talk like proper musos. And in the end, talk about little gay fellas, little Chinese fellas.
Chinese monkeys.
And then, with Claire mucking it up, it's sort of like, oh, for God's sake, we can't get anyone because,
But they do that because they say, that was incredibly muso. Okay, let's stop that. Let's stop talking about the music because let's go back to... I mean, there was one episode, isn't there, when they can't think of anything to say and they just spend the whole time just trying to get through to Carl. Yeah. I mean, that shows...
Good episode.
I told you about...
It's a good episode.
Laura. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's centered around Carl still.
In that.
No, I think I was going to say that Steve is more relaxed on the Claire episodes for sure, but that one's funny because he's sort of relaxed, but then suddenly he gets his comeuppance at the end of the show anyway. Yeah. But still,
I think Steve though generally is very good at handling any situation in comparison to Ricky. I think Ricky does require certain standards to be met in order to produce his humor, whereas Stephen is so much more flexible.
Yeah, I think so. What do you think of Ricky in general now? Because we talked a lot about him and we get stick for talking about him, but his I think his Twitter thread I read somewhere was about 92% male. That figure might have changed, but do you like him how he is now as much as you did then, or less, or the same?
Daisy's shaking her head.
No.
Go on, Daisy.
No, I find him awful. I feel embarrassed for him because of his Twitter, where he just constantly is liking his own praise and retweeting stuff about how great he is. I just think it's such a fall from grace, because he was so funny, and he probably is still really funny, and he's really quick, really sharp, but now it's just he can't be bothered. I just think he just does the laziest, easiest thing he can do, and he gets paid little money for it, so fair play to him. People are going to watch that, but it's just terrible.
Yeah, and I totally agree. What about you guys?
Well, to be honest, I actually didn't ever like Ricky.
Oh, really?
Didn't you really?
Beginning, so my feelings are sort of roughly the same. I remember I saw the, I can't remember which stand-up show it was, but the one where he's with Robin Ince afterwards in the extras.
Is that Animals of Politics, isn't it? One of those.
It's all, he's very much bullying Robin in those.
Yeah.
And I found him a very unlikable person then, and I've sort of seen that all the way through his career, really.
Do you see him as a bully, Ellie?
Yeah.
It's no shit.
I can't sort of defend him on that. I think not that he's malicious. He's a little schoolboy.
Well, I know that some of the questions that you asked on the email was, how did you get into the show? And actually, I got into the XFM shows because I really liked Ricky and his stand-up. I'd heard about, what's it called? Carl's travel show, Idiot Abroad.
Oh, Idiot Abroad, yeah.
Yeah, I'd seen that advertised. I loved Ricky's stand-up, and I'd seen that advertised, and I just thought, I know, it's this guy they know. I never watched it because I didn't really know him very much. And then I remember I was in HMV, and I saw the Ricky Gervais show, the cartoon, in there, and I was like, I'd never heard of it. And I was like, what's that? So I bought it, and I loved it. And then obviously I got to know Carl, and then I watched Idiot Abroad, and then I think I just loved all of it so much. I was just, Googling, is there any other Carl show? And I found XFM. So yeah, I actually started from my love of Ricky stand-up, actually.
Mine was the same. I loved The Office, and I loved Ricky. I loved his stand-up. And then I think I found the podcast. And then from the podcast, I was just on YouTube trying to find other clips and things. And then I think somebody introduced me to the XFM shows, and I downloaded them all, but I couldn't remember who it was. But it was many years ago. It all started with the stand-ups and into the podcast. I knew Carl before An Idiot Abroad, so I was really excited when that came out. But I actually always forget to watch it. It was only because I heard in the podcast the other day that you were talking about how you really like it. Miles, you were, and so I started watching it again, and I actually didn't know that the music from your podcast came from that. I was always like, what is that noise? Why do they have that? Where did that come from? And then I watched An Idiot Abroad, and I was like, okay, there it is.
So 60 quid to get the rights to that. 60 quid.
Well,
165 quid.
I said I love that one you got as well.
You all had different ways into kind of the XFM shows, and different opinions of Ricky at different points along the way, which is
I'd be interested to know if for example, Miles, does your girlfriend like the shows?
No, she doesn't. No, she doesn't at all. I mean, she doesn't like the podcast, so
she doesn't like our podcast. So she doesn't.
I'm gonna listen. No, I think do you know what? No, she's not a big fan. I think she liked The Office for a bit, but I do think there is a lot of people who found Ricky annoying even back then, let alone back now. I don't know, Ricky's such a divisive figure. I mean, quite deliberately so, and I do think it's a marketing thing. He's kind of got his really sort of saccharine, kind of sweet side, where it's like, look at all these animals, look at this charitable organisation stuff I'm working at, but then also I can say whatever the fuck I want, freedom of speech, la 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 la. It's like it's almost like it's a marketing device deliberately created to appease both kinds of of people, whether it's gender or personality based, whatever it is, it's kind of very mass marketed produced. But obviously the whole freedom of speech thing is very sort of fashionable now, isn't it? And the cancel culture thing. He's deliberately quite a sort of provocative person, but it's just weird that he's got this sort of softer, more sort of saccharism, which you would associate with, I don't know, a sort of more female audience, however horrible that sounds. It's just like, but that's always the comments that I see just on his Twitter thread, and I just see it as so manipulative, but then it is a marketing tool, right? That's exactly what it's designed for.
I was going to say, he is quite heavy on marketing at the moment. I'm not quite sure why. That sort of really built up, didn't it, before Afterlife, and then really kicked in after Afterlife. But yeah, he really seems to be on a self-marketing campaign.
You don't need to, though. Like
Afterlife, the movie coming next year.
Oh, mate,
is it?
No, I don't know.
Tell.
I wouldn't be surprised though.
I don't really like Afterlife.
That's awful.
No,
terrible show.
But Afterlife, I feel is an example of where he's trying to appeal to both genders, a multi-gendered audience, rather than his usual stuff. He's trying to appeal. He doesn't appeal to us. Mars and I don't like it. It doesn't sound like. Does anyone like it?
But my boyfriend really likes Afterlife, and I can't stand it. But he doesn't have a very sophisticated comedy palette, so
throw him under the bus.
That's why. He won't listen to this. It's fine. So he really likes Afterlife, and when we first met, he admitted that he's like Mrs. Brown's Boys. Cut that straight out. Not having that. Yeah.
That's a double offence in my book.
I know. So he likes the American Office, but can't stand the English Office. So he's not got a great...
That's why you get on so well. How was it like, Daisy? You said you grew up with, is it 4 brothers? You said
4 brothers, yeah.
How did that work out? What was that like?
It was interesting. Yeah, I was the only girl though, so I was just really spoiled. So actually, I was sort of like queen of the castle. I could do whatever I wanted. One of my brothers is only a year older than me, so we were very close. But I think just naturally, I fell into things they want to play. We used to watch wrestling on a Saturday morning, and we used to play like wrestling. And so I just sort of found their interest. But ultimately, I had the last say because I was the only girl. So I had kind of a mix of being like the queen and also sort of being out playing in the mud and doing all the like gendered boy things.
Do you think that's partly why you got into the XFM shows, because of the kind of more...
I think yeah, just that sort of humour is what I've grown up with, and like a lot of my friends are male now. A lot of my close friends have always been male, so I think it's just what I'm used to. I'm sort of, like you say, that's what I've been sort of filtered to like, and what I'm used to.
No, that's interesting. I think that comes back to what Stacey was saying about socialization. Your primary socialization at home was male dominated rather than female.
I guess when I've got 2 sisters.
How did you find that? And do you find that impacted what comedy you like later on?
One of them likes the Ricky Gervais shows, and she will listen to the podcast and things, but she's never, if I play her XFM, she'll listen to it and she'll kind of laugh, but she would never listen to it on her own back. My other sister, she hates Ricky Gervais, and she would never really, I don't think she would really like the XFM shows, or she wouldn't hate it, but she would just be like, it's not really my thing.
I think it's so typical. I don't like Alan Partridge, yet everyone seems to love Alan Partridge. I've just never got it.
I've really tried since being an Elton John fan to get into Alan Partridge, but I just don't know where to start. It's so overwhelming. I just watch the movie and then I don't know what else to do.
No, start series 1, I'm Alan Partridge. In fact, that's the only good one. I wouldn't even go to series 2.
Start and stop there.
But it is brilliant. Yeah, just stop there. 6 episodes, done. See you later, though. But no, it is good. But Mars, I introduced Mars to it, and he was like, I have to tell you. He felt like really guilty. It was like confession. He said, I don't actually like it.
Like, but with the XFM shows, like, do you know what? All of you stories, I like how obsessive an XFM fan gets. Like, you watch a little bit, a snippet of Carl, just like a smidge, and you're just hooked. And I don't feel like we get that obsessive anymore now. I feel like we're just so disposable. It's like you watch or listen to something, it's like, okay, that's it. Whereas I remember just like watching the Meet Carl Pilkington thing, and I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, I love everything he says. I love his voice. I love his deadpan, like, nature. And I was like, it was just like crack. I was like, I want more of this. I want to know more about his opinions and stuff.
I got a couple of female friends who like An Idiot Abroad and who know who Carl is. And I've tried to introduce them to XFM shows. And one of them listened to a couple of episodes, like a couple of the podcast episodes or the Ricky Gervais show TV series. I watched a bit of that. But they're happy to just stop. They've never had like the interest to go back further, or I've showed them XFM and they've just sort of like, oh yeah, I can't be bothered, like I'll just leave it there. But I can't see how you can have that bit if you can like the Ricky Gervais show or you can like An Idiot Abroad and not want to watch or listen to all of it. Like how can you just stop there and be okay with that?
Yeah, my dad's the same. He loves it. He loves An Idiot Abroad. He's got me the DVD for Christmas. He's like, he talks to me about it, but has no interest in going back to the XFM shows at all, or the podcast. None.
I don't think it's like gender bias or whatever. I think it's probably more down to sense of humour really biased, isn't it? Like whether you find the shows funny or not, and whether you're prepared to stick with them. And then there's another thing: do you like radio or do you like audio? Not everyone likes audio. My girlfriend is not a big fan of podcasts or radio, whatever. I personally love it. I think it's one of the best mediums. I'd rather listen to radio than watch TV, I think. But you've got to find that person who goes, do you like that? Do you like that? And do you like them together? Yeah, brilliant. So
what do you guys think of audio as a medium then? Do you kind of agree with that? Or do you feel, does it appeal to you, or do you rather TV?
I've always got a podcast on. I'm big into podcasts. Always got a podcast on. If I'm not sort of talking to someone or reading a book, then I've got a podcast on in the background. Always.
What about you, Ellie?
I like audio, but mine is really focused solely on comedy. So I will go through Spotify and I will just go from comedian, just seeing what they're all like. I don't try any other themes at all.
And are many of them women? The podcast presenters that you're trying out, or is it
very rare?
Okay.
What is some of your comedy recommendations, Ellie? Do you have the ones you like to listen to, the ones that you return to?
Apart from our show, which you'd obviously...
I wouldn't call that comedy, Gary. Definitely wouldn't.
I'm joking, I swear. I wouldn't say that, quite rightly.
Well, this is where the XFM shows and the podcast as well are completely against my normal character, because I very rarely ever listen or watch to anything twice. I'd prefer to discover something new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will listen to those shows again and again and again. It never gets bored.
I love it.
Well, I was thinking actually about this whole thing of why is there more male than female listeners to XFM? And I did also think, is it something to do with the kind of people that like XFM are the kind of people that typically perhaps will just watch stuff again and again and again. But it's funny how Ellie, you said that you're not like that. However, you are with this show. Yeah. And I don't know if that's, again, something that's more a male thing, and that's why more males like the XFM show. I don't know, but I've thought about that. So many people listen to them again and again, don't they?
That is such an interesting thing. But I bet if you were to ask anyone, if it's not radio, then I bet there's like a whole bunch of people that have watched like Friends about a million times, or like The American Office. Like everyone's got that little, that little comfort blanket, don't they?
Yeah. But interesting what Stacey said. I think that XFM probably was a male-dominated station, and maybe it was the station that was male-dominated, and so therefore their core audience at the time was.
It definitely was, though, because you think, well, since when they rebranded as Radio X, there was a whole backlash basically saying, oh, you had this massive opportunity to do something really interesting with a rebrand. First, you call it the worst name ever, Radio X. I know Steve Taylor wrote who was on this podcast, who wrote a really interesting article on it. Then they get Ricky Wilson, Chris Moyles, the fat and talentless Chris Moyles.
He's great.
He's good, isn't he? I think there was just a whole bunch of people like Verna Kay at one point. It was just like men. It's like, God, what is going on? Like, I love Alison John, but I listen to like either comedy or politics podcasts most generally, but and it is proper male dominated. Need to change.
There's not one part where they say that Zoe Ball was going to take over, or she was going to be covering. But interesting when they say that, don't they talk about Big Boy? Who was it? Steve, who was her boyfriend at the time? Someone else famous.
No,
him. But they reference him and say, oh, is it because of him that she's winning the show? So even when they do have a female that's coming to present, they put that down to Big Boy Slim.
Big Boy Slim.
And Zoe Ball always marketed herself as a ladette, like a partly ladette. I'm not saying she was or wasn't, but she
Sarah
kind
Cox
of
did
had
as well.
that. Yeah, Sarah Cox is the same.
You can't say that on radio though. You can't say
Big Breakfast. No.
They do this really bad joke, like Steve does it. I don't think he's sexist, incidentally. I don't think any of them are. Oh, they do that one thing where they're like, oh, who would you put into the jungle? Talking about I'm a Celebrity. They're talking about, oh, Anthony Warren Thompson there. And then Steve just says, oh, we've got to have someone who can cook. He said, yeah, but that's why you got the girls there. And I was like, ooh, that's in series 4.
Steve makes quite a few.
I remember that conversation, but I don't remember that comment that Steve made.
He does it a few times. Like he'll sort of he'll just be quite disparaging and just. But I to be fair to him, I do think he would regret that now. And
was it not satirical or was it a genuine?
I think his probably is satirical, and it was one of those things that you just say so quickly, and you just like, you know, we think about it too much because I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's one of those things that sometimes you do say things like that because it's the way we've been socialised, men have been socialised. It's not like you say, you look back and you think, oh, why did I say that? But it's because of the socialisation. You don't mean it in a sexist way, but it just shows how much society has that impact on you that you just immediately have that thought or make that comment.
I think that Steve does make quite a few comments like that throughout the show. I was thinking about it before, and on the One and Blog podcast, they talk about Incel Corner. They had that bit that kept trying to bring back where it's like Incel Corner when they talked about extras. And I think that actually Steve has quite a few, not to say he was or is an incel or anything, or even that he meant all of his comments, but he did make quite a few comments throughout the show that I did think, oh, that's going in Incel Corner. I listened to one yesterday and he's talking about going to a party and he's chatting to a woman all night, and then at the end of the night she says, oh, my boyfriend, blah blah blah, and he's like, oh, she should have told me at the start. And again, I know he's joking, and that is, you know, it's an of the time joke, but he does quite a few things like that, or he, you know, speaks about women quite negatively.
There's one where he talks about they're talking about hiring someone like a PA or receptionist or something, and he said he's a woman, and Ricky's like, oh, sexist. And he's like, okay, well, it could be a man.
Sexist.
Yeah.
But Ricky loves that. As soon as he can pick up on something someone else has done, even though he's the naughtiest overall on anything. But yeah, we'll see.
I think that's pent up sexual energy from Steve.
Yeah.
I do think he was so.
Yeah. He gave £1 to a homeless woman because she was a woman. I mean, you know.
God, this is so bad.
That's naughty.
It's also that one where he talks about that might be the podcast though, about negging.
That was the podcast, but he was against that. He did say, didn't he say it's not right to do that, but
he was sort of trying it out, but he wasn't really
of
the mind of that it was the right thing to do necessarily,
but promoting it in a way. No, Stacey, I want to come back to your point of socialization, because I think it's really interesting, and I kind of think that it's not necessarily specifically being taught about different types of comedy and different types of lifestyles, but it's just a process that's primary and secondary throughout school, and it kind of leads to, because there must be something that causes it to be a 90-10 split. There's nothing inherent in it. I'm interested in your take.
I think it's something else that's crossed my mind. Is it because of socialization that I think people who are into podcasts and the XFM show, and it's people that are perhaps, again, I might be completely wrong here, people who are a bit more into media in general. And again, is that a typically male, because men have been socialized to be more, I don't know, maybe it's something else I've thought about.
No, it could be, because it's not like they're 3 lads, but the humor, like there's laddie shows like Top Gear, say, for example, which is going to have a male-dominated audience, but none of the lads on the show are particularly like masculine. They're not like effeminate necessarily, but none of them are like lads or laddie lads.
No,
and Miles and I aren't as well.
I think that's where the class thing comes in, maybe. As in, I think
Ricky,
Ricky's got a very working class background of humour. Carl, particularly, I mean, things he talks about in terms of what went on at school, like the teachers were getting them to, what was it now? They got them to do something with a catalogue where they and I genuinely believe that's true. I don't know if any of you have ever read any of Carl's books.
No, I haven't actually.
he talks in depth about school there, and the fact that he said this building was just completely run down, like it would needed to be knocked down. And I think it is genuinely true, and he talks about it in his books much more openly. And so again, I think the humour and the way they are is that kind of working class and the era as well. And I think, yeah, maybe that's something to do with you like the humour if you're that kind of person. And I don't know if again that then links into people who like that kind of working class type humour. Is there something to do with less females have been exposed to that because of the socialization thing? I don't know. I think it's something to do with the humour as well. I'd say I don't know, well, I might be wrong, but I think
the humour's definitely,
it's not laddie.
Yeah, it's not laddie. It's a bit rude and it's a bit naughty, but they don't do male sort of fart jokes like typical, but they do talk about Auntie Nora farting, which is kind of like doesn't seem to me like a male way of putting it, but it's kind of like just weird their own little way. So it's still strange how it appeals so much more to males.
I think a lot of comedy is can sometimes be framed around gender. I mean, that would be for the same reason you're saying, Gary, about like toilet humor, that women would laugh at, jokes about periods or something like that. No, I'm just talking very frankly. There's not those male and female subjects, are they? That you can relate to everything. It comes from and if you're not, then you would find the comedy in something, even from hearing someone's subjective experiences.
But through socialization, things like the toilet humor tend to have been, maybe it's different now, but tend to appeal more to men for some reason. There's no inherent reason why that is, but because you and I don't like toilet humor, do we? Like we're not laddie lads. We're not. I don't know. So, but yet we really like the X-Men show.
No, again, though, I think it's immature humor, isn't it? And again, I think it's just women are not socialized so much to be into that, because it's seen as, if a woman was talking about farts or whatever, I think it's seen as a bit more uncouth. If a man does it, it's more funny.
Yeah, but they do it in a weird way that's not like necessarily a male way, but in they talk about it still. Yeah,
I think class is definitely a really interesting point. I think a lot of it is like a class, because like obviously Steve is a bit more middle class, but Carl and Ricky are both working class. I grew up in a council estate, so a lot of the stories Carl tells, I really think he does believe them, or a lot of them are true from when he grew up, because there were always so many rumours around the council, around the estate, of like different things that had happened. So there was a house opposite me and up a little bit, and apparently a man lived there on his own, and he lived with a ghost that was his mum, and just all this like just nonsense stuff.
Did he live in a boat?
Stories.
With shorts, man.
2 TVs. But there's so many, like, that just comes to my head without even thinking of it. But there's so many stories from like the estate growing up. And again, my parents would have believed it in the same way that Carl's parents did. And my parents would have probably exaggerated a bit. So when telling me, they would have exaggerated it a bit and told me like this crazy story, like Carl's dad told Carl. So Carl believes it because it's his dad. And like, why would you not believe a story dad's told you?
Yeah.
Like, he definitely do believe it. And my parents are the same.
Yeah, it's
was there a horse in the house?
A giraffe. Actually, there was a horse that used to live on like a little bit of grass, like a green. It was at the end of the council estate, a tiny bit of green where they used to play football. And for like a year, there was a horse tied up into the middle of the green. And it was just like, that was it. There was just a horse there.
The horse has only got a little bit of grass to start with, and they play football on it as well. So it doesn't even get that,
Daisy, we've got a massive coal shaped hole on our show. So if you could come in every week.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I don't think that's a hat I would want to take, actually.
I don't think Steve is as middle class as he thinks he is as well. Like every time he says it, I always think like, I don't know. When I think with middle class, you've got to be. I don't even know what that means, right? To be fair, I think when I was growing up, if you had a Dyson, your family were doing pretty all right. That's what I'd call middle class. I think Steve probably grew up in quite a nice house, but I don't think it was like massive. I think it was like 4 bedrooms, like.
I think it's about it is about money, but it's also about it becomes cultural, then, doesn't it? Like, for example, it just sprang to mind. There's a show where they talk about being kids, and Steve says parents used to put music on or something, and Ricky said that he didn't. Or did he go around? Actually, I don't know. But I do remember Steve talking about his parents and the way they were when he was a child briefly, and it made me think, that's maybe a bit more indication of a middle class household.
That was about Christmas. Ricky was saying that in his household they weren't allowed to turn off the TV.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah.
And Steve, he said, yeah, we were probably listening to a BBC Four concerto or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's a very male thing, though, I think, to pretend. I think he plays up a lot of those things, definitely.
Well, he talks about like Ricky and Carl's house is stinking of chip fat.
Yeah,
so they got the chip fat fryer
that's more
on,
my house,
and he says that's a very working class smell and stench. You know, he's like he literally,
and he hates
that.
He always eats rubbish, and like Steve will have the octopus tentacles, and you know, Ricky will just have burgers and chips and ketchup.
He won't be anymore though, won't he? He's vegan.
Yeah, he's vegan now.
He's proper vegan, yeah.
Oh, I think he needs some of the iron. Bit of red meat in there.
Well, you know what's funny though? They talk about on one of the shows, don't they? Like, oh, what do vegans eat for Christmas? Ugh, you know.
Yeah.
Do they?
And now he's.
But that's half the time though, isn't it? Because like he was like vegetables there, whereas now he's having bloody Beyond Burgers and broccoli.
They're like, oh, what do vegans have at Christmas? Oh, they have a nut cutlet.
Oh yeah.
They really laugh about it. And they like to talk about tofurkey and stuff, and they're like, "Oh yeah, tofurkey."
Again, look how things have changed so much more now. It's just I went to a vegan festival the other day.
Yeah, I've been to.
It's rubbish.
So have times changed or
they
not?
They had like a rave on. There was like a vegan rave tent, and I was like, what the. Why are vegans known for like hardcore trans?
This MDMA is not a tainted with animal.
It's not
gelatin.
It's really
no gelatin. Well, this is now an outro. We've just done the intro, and it's a little secret there because it seems like when you listened, it was like the intro and then the thing, and then now there's an outro. Wasn't all recorded in one bit. No. This was separately about 7 weeks later. But no, it was great show. From my memories of it, obviously it's not fresh, but it was very different. It was unique kind of for us. It was it's kind of a new experience to have sort of 5 people on the voices, and the girls were great. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Give us 2 stars upwards.
No,
and the second stars for the girls. Mars's girlfriend's getting annoyed. I can tell. There's some tension in the room. No, I'm sorry.
Well,
she can't hear.
Can I just say thank you?
Please do.
To Stacey, Daisy, and Ellie, you're all fantastic. I couldn't ask for better contributors, and hopefully give a little bit of insight of what it is to be a female in, as you say, quite a male dominant. I did find it quite difficult to talk about because I really don't want to be too polarizing.
Yeah.
And as a male talking about this subject, you walk the tightrope, and you don't want to stereotype, and you don't want to make too many sweeping generalizations. Part of my frustration, I remember just on the recording, is it's in my nature to want to find like a definitive reason for why there aren't more female listeners. So I think that might have come across as we spoke, because I think I just want to find an answer. But actually, with most of these things, life's much more complicated, and there are so many reasons why people don't listen, regardless of whatever gender you identify as. And so it's it's a tricky one, isn't it? I just want to find answers in life, and I think you can't always, can you?
No, there's a song in that, I think, somewhere. Dolly Parton a song about that next Tuesday. No, yeah.
No, but do you understand what I mean?
You don't want to fall into kind of, because we're like internal biases. Neither of us kind of clearly, like, we're not male dominated, but you kind of always, you're worried that you will fall into that and kind of not realise your internal bias. So that, I know what you mean. If that's what you mean. I kind of felt like that. That is what I mean, yeah. We didn't, I don't think, badly, but we can never be perfect. So, it was very brave of the girls to do it, and they all talked, wonderfully.
Yeah, definitely.
We did not.
No, we'll definitely do more of these in the future, because it's so lovely to invite people onto the shows, as I said before. So once again, thank you to Daisy, Ellie, and Stacey, and I hope you enjoyed the show, and you didn't feel too anxious listening to it, and you enjoyed it.
But I would genuinely, I always am, but genuinely would be interested in feedback on the show. And we hope you liked it. But if there, any sort of ways of, different.
And
things.
particularly if you are a female listener, or if you are a male listener and some of this struck a chord, or you didn't think about some of those points that we raised perhaps, or you have something to add to the debate, very interesting to hear them, and we can repeat those on a later episode. But otherwise, can I just say, please continue to rate, like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, because that'd be brilliant. Just helps with the algorithm and help people to find this unfindable podcast. And can I also say, do check us out on Patreon and buy us a coffee at Ko-fi to help keep us in burgers and grapes. And all your money is used legitimately, morally, ethically. That is not used to finance any kind of drug trafficking in Mexico or any unsavory reasons.
Yes, the money is great. But, you know, with this show that you've just listened to, it was our way. We didn't do it perfectly, but we wanted to talk about females in this space, but not if it's two males. You know, we didn't want it, that'd be inappropriate.
Yeah.
So we sort of got them involved. And it's, you know, they were great. There's more to be said. There's no answers found, but there's no answers to be had.
And that's just like life, ladies and gentlemen. There's not a definitive answer for anything, but we muddle on.
Is this your song
get
again?
through it. It's beautiful, isn't it? I'm quite impressed by this.
I think we made a lot of points that were unnecessary, and I'm
all right.
Mainly me.
Fucking hell!
No, listen.
Say what you really think, Gary.
Oh, Mars lost it now. You can't, you know, like Ricky.
Lose a confidence.
I'm saying me. I did it far more. No, Mars has made some great points. Mars is a bit worried how it came across.
Do you know what? No.
Better than me.
I'm passionate about this subject. As such,
really well.
I'm very passionate, and sometimes with that passion comes to a lack of eloquence, but I think I salvaged it today. Thanks very much, mate. All right, well, we'll speak to you again soon, listener. Have a lovely weekend whenever this goes out, and I'm sure it'll be fine.
You're going to attend to the pigs now because it's a day break on the farm. Started on Tuesday. No, thank you, and see you soon.